This is the ivy plant motif, and we will begin with the leaves right here, and I will show you how to make the texture. I've mixed up some greens. I'm going to put a little bit of this yellow in here. I've got my woodland set. You can use like a coconut, pineapple, or regular yellow, or yellow with a little brown from any set that you have. And all we're doing is just putting a little bit of that underneath some of these leaves, and we're just kind of moving around our painting. So now that I've put a little bit of this yellow green underneath the background here, I'm going to add a little bit of a lighter green under here. And I've got a terracotta color. If you have a different palette, you can use a little bit of orange and brown, maybe pop a little red or pink in there depending on what colors you've got in your box and available to you. And so I'm coming in here with some strong pigment. This is, in this box, a little redwood, cavern, and bear. Some of those. And I'm going to go along this outside. So I've gone along this side here a little bit to kind of get some minerals there. I'll just right now pull this over a little on that side. I'm going to come back into here later, but I want to just lay that down as a background right there. So now I can take some green and put them over these yellow leaves that I had started with. I've got a couple different ones, so I can try those out over here. So I'm going to kind of skip around from leaf to leaf with this color, and as long as you don't put your hand in your painting, that works. You can turn it around and you can leave the white of the paper in here. I'll show you what we'll do with that afterward. So just trust the process of that. And so you see it's starting to dry and pull here. I can just add more layers in as I go. Now this looks like a bunch of avocados really, but that's okay because we'll come in and kind of fill that gap in, and we can also pull back a little bit to get a texture here, and I'll show you, you can kind of dab in a little bit of your brown from your box. That one's a little dry to do that, but so while it's wet, if you want to tap in, and you can always re-wet the area just to kind of loosen that up. You can see I'm kind of, and leaving the white of the paper as a highlight is fine too. And also going over the leaf just on one side can also make it have a shadow and more realism. This is just the very basics of how to do leaves, but something like this can really start to get you comfortable with it so that you can add to your skill as you continue to paint more and more. You'll start to get a natural feel for it. It's a little bit dark, so I'm going to take that pigment and move it over here instead of to my paper towel, and just kind of saving a little bit of my paint by doing that. And I can even come back in here and kind of add a little bit of this yellow into that wet on the top. It's called daylight on the top layer. Pop in more green. So there's a couple of techniques. You don't have to use all of them in one painting, but it gives you a good idea so that in the future you'll have a couple of choices in your skill toolbox. Right, so you saw how I was putting in those extra layers and playing around with how much water versus paint I was putting in and blending some of these leaves. Now I've gone outside the lines here, so I'll just kind of draw that into it. If you make a mistake, you can always use a pencil and just put some additional leaves in there and just fix any mistakes that you feel like you made. No one knows what the original drawing was, so I don't worry about it. Now we're going to go in here and do another layer on this vessel. I'm going to get more of this brown. Maybe that's what, oh, that was for the table. So we're going to kind of come in here and deposit some more paint to get that crackly look. I'm going to kind of flood this with water and make a wet on wet technique. Not too much, but you can see that that paint underneath, I really want to get a nice deposit on that edge, and it's going to travel across, keeping some of the lines from before, and then now I'm going to just pop in. You can even use a little bit of a blue-green if you want to kind of put in that mossy look, and just deposit a couple of different colors there. I'm going to get right up to that line. Oop, I do not want that to be in front of my leaf. So I'll pull that back, being a little bit careful not to mess up what I've got going on here. You can see how that's moving and traveling. So I will get some more in here. And see how that turns out. And I'll come back in for a final layer. We'll work on our table over here. We've got some of this brown. I'm putting a sandy color in it. If you just have brown, you may just want to add water, or you can also add a little bit of red depending on what type of wood you want to imagine this is. So I'm going to carefully, we were just putting a lot of water in here, so we don't want to touch that vessel. Either just wait to do the top or leave a white space. We can close that in later after it dries. That way it won't travel. And over here. So we've got our base layer. We have to let that dry for a minute. And so I will come back in here and just kind of pop a little bit like that. My paper's buckling a little right there. That's okay with me, but if you don't want that to happen, don't put as much in there. It's not very dark. And now I'm going to take this darker brown, and this is still a little bit wet, so it's going to blur a little bit, which is fine with me for right now. You don't have to go all the way around to every single edge, so that's totally artistic license there. Now I'm kind of adding in a little bit of texture. I want the main texture to be here, and the focal point is going to be this pot with the pretty leaves. And this line here is drawn in to be a shadow. The sun must be really beaming down from that side, so you can keep that in mind when you're doing your leaves if you really want it to look a certain way. Even the pot would be darker on that side rather than here, so we may add some. Come back in here with the last run on this one and kind of put a little more of a shadow on this side. And I'll just see how that ends up drying. And now this, I'm going to take a clear brush because I don't want it to be white and kind of close the gap on that. So it leaves the shape, but the white of the paper is not showing through. And I can take a little bit of gray and kind of pop in some shadows on the back side of these leaves, matching the shadow everywhere else. If you want to, you don't have to do that. Especially when this is dry, you want to come in here and put the shadow. That's too wet right now. You really want a watered down brush here, otherwise it'll leave a funny stark shape. Oh yeah, I was going to go back over this one and kind of pop in maybe a little bit of yellow there. Popping in a little bit of this highlight to some of the darker leaves. Alright, so I do want this to have a nice shadow. Thin here, a little bigger there. A little less descript. My brush wasn't very wet, so I'm going to disperse that paint. Alright, you can continue to work on some of these details now that that's dry. Really want this table to look like this is in the foreground. Oh, that dried up nicely, so this is going to be my finished piece.